Hello, my name is Dr. Mackenzie Barr. I am a registered and licensed dietitian, and within the Department of Dietetics and Human Nutrition at the University of Kentucky, we have our Performance Nutrition and Body Composition Laboratory. And in the lab, we have the Quark RMR assessment, or resting metabolic rate assessment. And I'm going to go over quickly about that test and the results that you would receive following. So during the RMR test, you would come into our lab, and this is a photo here on the left of what that looks like in our actual lab. Typically, you're fasting for about 8 hours prior to the assessment. And when you're there, you are underneath this hood type of mechanism, laying calm, breathing at a steady state as normal as possible. When you come, your information is collected prior to completing the assessment. So we gather height, weight, age, sex, and ethnicity. Once you complete the test, the information that we receive, so those results that we get afterwards, can tell us a little bit about your resting energy expenditure. So that would mean the amount of calories that you would need to consume per day at a resting state, so just at a baseline state. During the test, again, you're laying under this hood, calm as possible and breathing steady. And it typically does take about 10 to 30 minutes. And that range is a little wide, but it depends on the normality of your breathing. So when you first lay down, people are typically a bit anxious at the beginning. So we wait for you to calm down in your breathing to get to a normal state. And we capture that portion of time in the assessment so we can get an accurate picture of your resting energy expenditure. For our printout results, if you've had this test done, you can walk through with this information on your own results, or if not, maybe you'll be interested to learn more about the test and the results and receive an assessment of your own. So the top portion here is information that we've gathered on this individual prior to coming in for the assessment. So we have a Caucasian male that's 21 years old, and we gathered height and weight to then calculate a BMI of 30.6 kilograms per meter squared. Below that is the canopy results, and this is essentially just the information about how long the test took. So the test time started at 10:30 in the morning. It took a total of 42 minutes total, and what we utilized as the assessment time frame is 15 total minutes. I do want to mention right here about this Harris-Benedict equation, and if you didn't have this actual measured test done, we do have types of equations, such as the Harris-Benedict equation, that can tell us an estimated caloric need. So as you'll see in the next portion of the results, it will show what the assessment actually measured compared to what the equation would have measured for us. So the printout results, what we typically are showing people, and the most important part that people want to know about, is that top portion of information under metabolic. And that first column is really the main takeaway. So your resting metabolic rate and what you should eat at a resting steady state, essentially what you look like on that bed, is 2,260 calories per day for this individual. And again, as I mentioned about that Harris-Benedict equation, that would be our predicted equation. And what was predicted from the equation was 2,227 calories. So very similar, but we do see with that measured portion that it is a bit higher, and that is what we should typically go off of because that's an actual measured amount of calories per day. Right below that is our respiratory quotient, or RQ, and here, ironically, both of these ended up the same, of measured and predicted of 0.85. And what those really mean in an equation format is our VCO2, so 276, divided by our VO2 of 325. And this test is really showing us the amount of carbon dioxide that you respire or you let out of your lungs, and the amount of oxygen that you're consuming or breathing in. So when you divide these two numbers by each other, you get a respiratory quotient of 0.85. And yes, what does that really mean? Is that we're talking about the substrates that you're using as energy to respire, breathing here. And what we're seeing below in the substrate sections is about 51.7% of fat is being used and 48.3% of carbohydrates are being used. And this respiratory quotient is just showing that we have a mixture of substrates being used for respiratory energy. If you were at total carbohydrates, it would be 1.0. If you were at total protein, it would be 0.8-ish, 8.5, 0.85. And fats are typically at 0.7. But again, we're usually not in one substrate alone, so it usually is a mixture. So what we see here is just that he's using a mixture about half and half of fat and carbohydrates. And lastly, this bottom portion of this graph that you see below, as I mentioned, this test was a total of 42 minutes. And this yellow portion is the 15 minutes that we utilized for the actual data above. So we waited for his breathing to calm down and get to a nice steady state. And yes, we probably could have, put this up a little bit more since it seems relatively similar here, but we utilized this 15-minute portion for the test. And this is the output that we received. So after, you calm down, you're in a resting state. That's really what we want, is a baseline resting metabolic rate, right? So of course, now what? Maybe you're interested in having an RMR completed, which you can go find the information about scheduling an assessment on our website, or you can refer to our FAQ page if you're interested in learning more about items that you could change in your lifestyle or dietary patterns that may influence your resting metabolic rate. Of course, items like gender, age, height, weight are going to influence your resting metabolic rate as a whole. However, if you're interested in changing some dietary habits or maybe increasing your lean body mass, so exercising, lifting weights, you can learn about that and when you should come back for a follow-up test so that you can identify if anything has changed. But of course, you want to wait for a certain time point to come back to see if it really is changing. So you can refer to these additional videos to learn more about that information. Again, please refer to our website if you have any other questions, and I hope this was helpful.